Hi again, and welcome to Old Dog Minis. Today I'm going to be painting two versions of the Barbarian hero from HeroQuest, one from the base game system and the other one from the First Light. I'm going to be talking about various things to do with Barbarians, to do with HeroQuest, to do with painting, and I hope you enjoy it.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hi. Today I'm painting the Barbarians from HeroQuest and HeroQuest First Light. There's not much to it. I'm not doing anything particularly fancy. They're not going to be display quality, that's for sure. But there's certainly, by the time I'm finished, I'm pretty happy with the end result. They both look pretty good. Barbarians themselves actually come from a Greek word. The Greeks, back in the 500s and 400s BC, used to basically think that anyone who wasn't Greek and didn't speak Greek just went bar, bar, bar. And that's actually where the word barbarian comes from. So anyone who didn't speak Greek and anyone who wasn't from Greece was a barbarian. This changed a little over time and became applied to some of the rougher elements of humanity, let's say. The Goths, the Visigoths, the Northmen. I mean, our typical vision of a barbarian these days is probably either a Viking warrior or Conan. The Frank Frazetta artworks seem to have been a major influence. The ones that he painted for the Conan covers are definitely a major influence on these minis. They're basically muscle-bound warriors wearing very little clothing. The black hair is definitely Conan. The big sword and all the furs and leather. So I really liked the sculpts. I think they've done a great job on both of them. As usual, I've started with a black all over prime, then used white primer to give it a zenithal highlight from the top, and then some dry brushing to fill in some of the darker areas so we don't lose all of our definition. Now I'm working from the outside in, which I tend to try to do as well, and from the top down. I do the top down so I can sort of stay organised. I do it outside in so that when I make a mistake, it's easier to repair that mistake. I'm not painting over an existing colour. And one of the main methods I've found for fixing mistakes these days is to actually just use my thumb. If I paint somewhere where I don't want the paint, I just very quickly wipe that area off with my thumb, and probably 90% of the time that's actually quite effective. I'm pretty happy about that. It makes life a lot easier than having to quickly clean your brush, wipe it over the area that you've just overpainted, and then go dip some more colour into your brush and carry on. This way it does seem to be doing the job. Now, the actual video itself, the paint job took about 50 minutes for both of them. I did them both at the same time because they were both based on the same original artwork from the Barbarian card from the game. So I was going to be using the same colours, I was going to be using the same approach. Generally though, if I'm painting multiple minis, I tend to paint a test mini first. And that's usually the one I also film. It doesn't always mean that that's what the rest of them are going to look like though. The idea with the test mini is I try to get it as close to the illustration as I can if I've got an illustration in the first place. Otherwise it's just about testing those colours out, making sure that I've got the right approach and that I've got I can see all the details. Sometimes half the battle is actually working out what's a detail, what's a different item, and what's just part of the texture of an item that is part of the surrounding material. And I find it's definitely better to do a test run, make some mistakes, and then fix it up for the rest of the minis. But in the case of the main heroes, I've actually painted all four of them, the Barbarian, the Dwarf, the Elf and the Wizard. I've painted both the basic game system version and the first light sculpts at the same time based on the same card artwork. But mostly I'm pretty happy with them. I do find I prefer the first light sculpts in a lot of ways. I think they've got just a little bit more character. They're just a little bit more interesting. I think it's partly a bit more basic, possibly a bit more flexibility from the Avalon Hill HeroQuest team when they were designing it. But there's certainly nothing wrong with the original sculpts either. I think they also look quite good. One of the problems I've found with a lot of these HeroQuest figures is that while I'm trying to emulate the artwork and get the colours as close as possible to the card artwork and the artwork from the box and so on, is that a lot of them they don't have a lot of the contrast that I'd prefer to have on my minis. They tend to have a lot of browns, and there's only so many browns you can have before it all starts looking a bit drab. So I have tended to get a little bit more sort of adventurous with some of the later minis that I painted. For example, the Killer's Keep and Return of the Witch Lord have duplicates of the original minis from the main game, and I definitely managed to give them a lot more exciting colour schemes while still trying to keep them looking right within the game and the game world. One of the other things I've been impressed with the HeroQuest minis is the level of detail. Given that they're mass-produced, pre-assembled relatively soft plastic minis, they've actually got quite a lot of detail in them. Obviously not as much as, say, a multi-part plastic kit from Vitrix or Games Workshop or someone like that, but considering they're pretty good value. They look very good on the table, and I'm certainly having a lot of fun painting them. As you can see here, I'm up to the skin. There's rather a lot of it. I usually leave the skin for as one of the last parts of a figure that I paint, because it's usually the lowest level. So if I've made mistakes and painted over some of the areas of skin earlier on, it's a lot easier to correct it before I paint the skin than after. And that's pretty much the philosophy of why I paint outside in. It does make my life a lot easier if I don't paint between the lines. If I make a slight error, it's just so much easier to fix it. And the only issue I've got is that sometimes fixing it can be a bit of a challenge, because it's not quite white, because I've used the Zenithal highlighting. The shade that I'm trying to repair is never 100% white. There's always a bit of grey in there from its mix with the black undercoat. So I've got to be a bit sparing with the white paint when I'm trying to do a repair. I always try and catch my overpainting when I can while I'm doing it. But in most cases these days my brush control is improving a lot, and I don't make as many mistakes as I used to. I'm almost done here. At the swords, I'm just about to paint the base. Filling in some last minute details there. And when I'm done, I'll paint the edge. I normally use a marker for the edge if I can, depending on what colour I'm after. The markers are just a bit quicker and easier to use, and I don't have to be as careful when I'm painting the edge of the rim of the base. I also try and keep the colour of the base thematic as well. Now in this case I used a red acrylic, but I did find that red was not quite the right colour, not the colour I didn't like it. So I actually went over it later with blood red speed paint, and that gave me a much better shade of red. Alright, we're up to the reveal of the finished models. Here's the one from the base game system. And I think it looks pretty reasonable. It's definitely a nice sculpt. It's a great little figure, and I've done my best to try and make it look as good as I can. And here's the one from First Light. Again, I slightly prefer this pose. I think it's more interesting, just a little bit more sort of alive than the previous version. Okay, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.